Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel, and welcome back to another Division 2 video. Now, as I said in a previous video, I'm doing a lot of videos for new and returning players that may need particular builds, farming videos, and yeah, it's just got that player in mind. And in today's video, I'm going to show you my build that I use to farm heroic content with 5 directives on, just so I'm getting the most XP per activity. And I'm just going to show you basically how I go about it. And you know, it is for the average player who may have a different playstyle than a lot of other people, because what I do find with a lot of the builds online that show this type of content, it may be specifically designed to one type of player. So I've seen builds where maybe somebody's using a Grenadier build, for instance, or using a Riot Foam build. Now, don't get me wrong, them builds do work, but I do find they're very situational. And also, if it doesn't suit your playstyle, you're not going to be getting through these activities as quick as some of these YouTube videos like to make out. So I'm going to show you just my run and gun, ongoing directive build, and give you a few areas where you could switch it up depending on your playstyle. Anyway, if you do like today's Division 2 video and it does help you out, don't forget to hit the like button for me, subscribe if you're new, and yeah, let's get into it. Right, so let's get into the crux of this ongoing directive build. As you can imagine, we're starting off with the St. Elmo's engine. On this, I've got assault rifle damage, health damage, and damage to targets out of cover. For those who don't know, the talent for St. Elmo's is the Actum Est. Shooting an enemy with this weapon will give 1 stack. At 100 stacks, the next magazine will be filled with shock ammo. So obviously, the reason I'm utilising this is because of the shock ammo, in case, you know, with Pistolero, you're going to need, obviously, status effect upon enemies. And don't get me wrong, I understand you need the status effects at the start because of, obviously, Pistolero, but it's always nice to have as a backup when you may be running out of bullets, if you don't kill anybody in time. But I'll assure you right now, you're going to have plenty of the hollow points around with the ongoing directive build. Secondary, I'm running it is a FAMAS. No particular reason, as you can see, I haven't even optimized this. I've still got magazine size on it, and the reason I'm using it is just because it's got the bleed damage bonus in case I ever do swap to it. And the reason I'm using it over an SMG is just to keep everything at long range, so I'm hitting harder, so I'm not getting too close to all the activities and things, because obviously with me being on my own solo most of the time, it's going to cause issues if you're getting up close and personal and maybe getting dropped with such a low armor count. But you'll see from the footage, these are the best weapons to have for me anyway. Now, getting into the gear of this build, I'm going to show you what I run and then maybe give you a few alternatives, because I do know that everybody's playstyle is a little bit different. But firstly, the mask, I'm using a Coyote's mask. It's obviously got max weapon damage, max crit hit chance, max crit hit damage, and then a max crit hit damage mod. The reason I'm running this particular mask is because if I bump her over to stats, you can see my crit hit chance is 54%, and at the moment my crit hit damage is 152%. So, with me using an AR and keeping a bit of a distance, for obviously survivability reasons, because obviously we're not running armor, with the Pack Instincts talent, we're going to be staying really in that 15 to 25 meter range. Well, ideally, that's where we're going to be. So obviously, if we are in that particular range, keeping a distance, making sure we're not obviously getting pincered by any movements from the enemies, we're going to be picking up the 10% crit chance, which is obviously going to meet the 60% cap. And then we're going to be getting another 10% crit damage, which will take us to 162%. Now, if I am closer and I am getting obviously 25%, as you can see here, for being in the first 25% crit hit damage, that means that's going to bump that up to 177% crit hit damage and still having 54% crit hit chance. So I'm trying to get the best bang for my buck by running this mask. So yeah, for me, for my playstyle, Coyote's mask. But if you're a bit more, I suppose, you know, reserved, you could go with the Catharsis, give you a bit more armor, use that 30% weapon damage bonus that you get, and obviously, you know, if you do get any status effects against you, you're going to get, obviously, you know, that taken off, the healing cloud, what have you. If you know how to use the Catharsis and you might want to prefer that, that's great. But for me, Coyote's mask. Now, moving on to the bag, again, it's another bag that I can, you know, reason I'm using it I'll explain now. So obviously with the Grupo, we're getting 15% crit damage straight off the bat for the one piece. We're then getting the weapon damage. We're then getting crit damage. And the reason I am using this particular bag at the moment, because obviously as you can see, I've got headshot damage on it here instead of crit chance. Ideally with this bag, it's probably the reason I haven't rolled it yet, because I am going to change it up. But if I can get this or another Grupo or a Fenris bag with crit chance and crit damage, I can afford to take that crit chance mod off and run another 12% crit damage mod. And in that way, that bumps up my stats even more. But the reason, as I say, I'm using this particular bag at the moment is just because I've actually rolled Wicked onto this bag, which is between Wicked and Creeping Death. I'm going to tell you, obviously, these scenarios now. That's what I want. So if I can get all that out of one bag pack for the moment, rather than having two separate bags, perfect for me. So obviously with Wicked, applying a status effect, which we're going to be doing with obviously the hollow point rounds, it's going to increase your total weapon damage by 18%. Now, when I play solo, I have Wicked. When I play in a group, I have Creeping Death. So I've got this one piece where I can just roll both talents on simultaneously, depending on what playstyle. The reason I take the hit on the weapon damage and use Creeping Death is just then, as a team, I can control obviously the enemy a little bit more, because when they're popping out of grids, doorways, if I'm hitting them with Creeping Death, they tend to be a bit more controlled and are less likely to shoot because they're all under status effect. So that's just a personal preference, but overall solo play, Wicked is for me the one I use. Now some people may say, why don't you use the Memento backpack? Obviously instead of the Coyote's mask, for instance, run a different mask, run the Memento backpack. Now for me, what the Coyote mask does compared to the Memento backpack does, it's just as good in this particular scenario. So in this particular scenario, I don't need skill efficiency, because you'll see why when I get to the skills, how I use them. I'm not running armor anyway, and I'm, for my playstyle, playing with an assault rifle, staying, keeping my distance in case of those particular pincer attacks like I mentioned. I'm not going to need armor, and if I do need armor, the amount of armor that I'd rather have the reds from the Coyote mask and what that particularly brings. And the main reason I don't use the Memento backpack, if you're still on the fence whether to use it or not, is simply because if you fast travel to safe houses, you're going to lose all your stacks and bonuses, whereas with ongoing directive, you're not going to. And obviously, the Coyote mask, for instance, those stats are just procced depending on obviously the situation when in the battles. So if we're doing control points, if we're doing world activities and we're fast traveling around, Memento backpack is useless. And I'd rather have the straight up 18% weapon damage from Wicked, and obviously the 15% crit damage that comes with the one piece Grupo and the Coyote mask over anything that the Memento brings to this situation. Now moving on to the first 4 pieces of ongoing directive, we're running the chess piece. As you can see from 4 pieces, we're going to get 15% status effects, which isn't really needed because we're using all reds. 3 pieces gives us reload speed. That's also great in solo play, to be honest with you. But then 4 pieces, rules of engagement. Shooting a status affected enemy will apply a mark. Killing a marked enemy grants a full clip of hollow point ammo for your active weapon and half a clip of the agent's active weapon to the rest of the party. Mark lasts 10 seconds, and as you can see, hollow point rounds amplifies weapon damage by 20% and applies bleed. So as you can see, with Pistolero, you obviously start with no ammo, but once you get obviously your first lot of this ammo, you'll never have to look back because you're always going to kill somebody with obviously 1 clip of this particular ammo. It's a rinse and repeat cycle. Once you've got the status effect set, obviously, on the enemy, it's going to be easy enough to control. And we're going to get into that again, how I go about getting that first clip of the hollow point round ammo in a minute. And then on this, I've got max weapon damage, max crit chance, and then a max crit damage mod. The great thing about the chess piece as well, increases the weapon damage by 35% for using the chess piece, so this is a no-brainer. We've got to have this on as a rule of thumb. Second piece, the holster, pretty straightforward, max weapon damage and max crit damage. The knee pads, again, pretty straightforward. Max weapon damage, max crit damage. And then the gloves, again, we've gone with weapon damage, and we've gone with the crit hit chance on this particular pair, just to obviously, you know, with us using an AR, we do need to keep it bumped up a little tiny bit, so we do run one piece with crit hit chance. Now, getting into the actual skills, for me, these are pretty important for the way that I run this build. So firstly, the normal pulse, just the scanner pulse. Reason being, one, it's nice and quick and comes back. But secondly, because obviously you've got Fog of War on, it's hard to see where the direction of, obviously, you know, the waves are coming. So for instance, if you're doing a public execution, you kill the first wave, and then the second wave spawning out of a room or a grid or something like that, give it a few seconds, pulse it, see where they're coming from. And obviously, because it comes back so fast, we're always going to be pulsing to make sure we know where all the enemies are. It just makes Fog of War so much easier to control. But the most important skill is the Bleed Hive. Now, the reason being, what I do is I will usually start when I've got no bullets, go into a, you know, the closest resource, a convoy. And the reason being, on approach, you can throw the Stinger Hive straight at, you know, 4 or 5 targets who are carrying the resources, have your pistol out, kill the red bars pretty quickly, which is going to give you the first lot of hollow point rounds. So then obviously at that point you're going to change to the St. Elmo's, get a few kills, and off we go. You've got your bullets, you've got a full clip of obviously the hollow point rounds, and everything from now on should be a formality. You know, it should be pretty easy at this point, because you're going to be killing an enemy with every clip near enough of the St. Elmo's. And if it does fail, if you don't, you should have these shock rounds that you've gathered from obviously the, you know, the St. Elmo's talent to keep you going. Now, a few do's and don'ts with this build. A few people may want to run the Oro with this build. You know, and don't get me wrong, it's a great gun, but the reason I don't use the Oro is just because you've got to be a little bit closer. You know, the Elmo's is a lot more accurate, especially from distance. And sometimes if I push too hard, even if they're all coming out the door, I'm obviously putting the Hive down, for instance, you know, there's a chance sometimes you're going to get caught short and get killed and have to reset everything. The reason I run the St. Elmo's is because it's a great gun, and I've got more survivability being able to keep a distance. And what I don't want to do is, I don't want to do 1 or 2 activities or 1 control point or just one thing and then die and have to go through the whole point of getting the bullets again. I just see that as a waste of time, and that's why I think this build sets a bit of a precedence when it comes to all the other builds that you're going to see online, because I think there's more survivability. You're not going to need to reset a lot. You can just, over the hour, I just feel like there's going to be more XP coming your way because you're not having to, you know, die, come back and reset with some of the other builds, as I mentioned earlier. So yeah, for me, this is my go-to, especially for the average player. And you know, it's that good that sometimes I even make sure I check my global settings to make sure I am actually running heroic and 5 directives, because sometimes it does feel so easy to do that if I find it easy, you know, plenty of the community are going to find it easy as well. So, final stats for the build. We're hitting 103,000 weapon damage. We've hit, obviously, 54% crit hit chance, 152 crit hit damage. That can get better, as I say, if we get a better backpack. We also get a nice 105% all weapon damage bonus, and another 30% assault rifle damage bonus. And then, of course, we get the Wicked talent, which is going to give us another 18% weapon damage. We get, obviously, hollow point rounds from the build itself, and then pack instincts from the Coyote's mask. So, you know, overall, we're getting a lot of damage. And obviously, when you think about 5 directives, there's a lot of builds out there, as I said earlier in the video, that are very situational. You know, you're not waiting for skills to recharge. You're not waiting for, I don't know, you're not having to fast travel to get more grenades. You're not having to wait for the foam. You know, there's only so many charges things like foam and sticky bombs and things like that can get you. With this build, it's simply run and gun. Don't care about anything else, in the sense of, you know, nothing will slow you down, so to speak. And I do think that's what sets this build out from the rest. And you know, that is it for today's Division 2 video. If it did help you out and you are going to run this build, let me know in the comments down below. Drop us a like, subscribe to the channel for more Division 2 content. And yeah, that's the video.